Hamas failed to honor its earlier agreement to release hostages. Surprised, right? Hamas now demands that the war end before releasing hostages, according to Arab mediators interviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Hamas also said that they would only provide a list of living hostages after a ceasefire. The terrorists demanded the release of murderers like Marwan Barghouti. Hamas might tell Israel which captives are alive. Hamas might release some live captives. But Hamas will regroup and prepare to do another October 7th. And Hamas will keep some hostages for years as insurance. In a Hezbollah hostage exchange, Israel released hundreds of terrorists for 3 captives. On exchange day, Hezbollah surprised Israel with 3 coffins. Hamas has rejected every hostage deal. Israel wants a deal to bring our hostages home from Hamas's terror dungeons today and will not allow Hamas to kidnap more hostages tomorrow. Israel wants a deal that will not allow Hamas to execute more innocent people ever again. Hamas' October 7th war on Israel's people cannot end with hostages in Gaza and Hamas on its feet. Israel's people need the 3 Ds. Remember, destroy Hamas, demilitarize Gaza, and de-radicalize Gazan society. The UN representatives are demanding Israel release a senior Hamas operative. World Health Organization's Dr. Tedros demanded Dr. Hussam Abu Safia's release. Special Rapporteur Albanese said doctors worldwide must boycott Israel if not. Hussam Abu Safia is a Gazan physician. So why did Israel arrest him? He directed Kamal Adwan Hospital, a military hospital. How do we know? Gaza's government and media simply posted online. Gaza's military are none other than Hamas and Islamic Jihad terror armies. You see, Dr. Abu Safia is mentioned online as being a colonel, Aqid in Arabic, a colonel in Hamas. Colonel Abu Safia was caught with 240 Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists in his hospital. 15 took part in the October 7th massacre. Hamas's murderers hid behind hundreds of Gazan patients. Last year, Kamal Adwan Hospital's then head was also caught. He admitted to being a Hamas officer. He explained, Hamas hide in the hospital because they know it is a safe place where they won't be targeted. A Kurdish doctor volunteering in the hospital earlier this year reported that he spoke with Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists in the hospital, including some on staff. Thousands of Hamas and Islamic Jihad were caught in Gaza's hospitals since October 7th. They are, by the way, dozens of hospitals functioning right now in the Gaza Strip. Murderers do not get immunity just because they wear a stethoscope. Shame on the UN for telling them that they do, in fact, actually get to go free. The entire issue is being treated as a hypocritical spectacle by the UN. It is more a spectacle than a real live tragedy with Israeli and Palestinian civilians who actually suffer from this hypocrisy. Now let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Our first question today comes from Wolf on YouTube, who asks, what is your latest comment about the actual situation in Syria and especially at the Golan Heights area?
So these are 2 separate questions. In Syria, there was a revolution, a military takeover from one horrid, detestable dictator, Assad and his regime, and a group of rebels, meaning a group of Islamists, actually took off their traditional garbs and put on suits and took over Syria. Now, they claim that they've changed and they will respect the minorities in Syria, they will respect human rights, they will respect women's rights, and they've even met Abu Julani with the representatives of the Christian communities in Syria. What they want is for the international arena to actually take them off the sanctions list and to bring in investments, for example, by Saudi Arabia, by the United States of America, by Europe, and so on. Now, it's all looking actually fairly promising at the moment. However, we need to remember that these people, until more or less yesterday, were Al-Qaeda terrorists. These people killed and murdered other people, by the way, amongst whom are many Muslims as well. We need to be cautious and we need to be wary of what they're planning to do in the long run once they actually get to be taken off the sanctions list and get those investments. I'm not saying do not have hope. We can all have hope, but be with your feet on the ground and be very, very vigilant of what truly is happening in Syria under this leadership.
Our next question comes from Mia on Instagram, who asks, I am hearing mixed reports on hostage negotiations. What is the current status?
I've said this before and I'll say this again, Mia. I have no trust in the Hamas. Now, the Hamas has been very badly hurt by the IDF. And there are remnants of the Hamas that the only thing they currently have as an asset, the only thing, is the live and dead hostages that they're holding on to. Israelis, there are 100 illegally held hostages by the Hamas. This is their only asset. The chances of them actually letting go are very, very slim. Yes, it seemed for a while that they were going to negotiate because they were with their backs against the wall. But if you ask me, the Qataris are not the correct mediators. The Egyptians were, until a certain moment, good mediators. They are less so at the moment. They have their own interests. And what is worrying to me is that we are not setting the stage for what needs to be given in the situation, because we have the upper hand. We have the northern part of Gaza, which was used against Israeli civilians, by the way, at the cost and at the lives and on the actual lives of Gazan citizens that have nothing to do with the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad terrorists. And what is happening now is that we should move more towards Gaza City, and that would make the Hamas operatives a little bit more weary of the IDF and perhaps give up the hostages. But as far as giving them up in mediation by Egypt or Qatar, or by the fact that they want the IDF to release mass murderers like Marwan Barghouti, it's not going to happen.
Our next question comes from Joni999 on Instagram, who asks, what do you think Trump will do after January 20?
So the incoming president, Donald Trump, has said again that the Hamas operatives better hand their hostages, our people, back as soon as possible. Otherwise, all hell will break loose. There was one time, and he did say this again recently. And I believe that he will do something very drastic if that is not happening. In fact, I said all the time throughout the negotiations, throughout the last year, from my understanding of Hamas, and I say this with a huge sense of tragedy, a huge sense of loss, of pain, they will not give up all the hostages because this is the only asset that they have. What the IDF needs to do, and Donald Trump can help with that tremendously, is not only gain control of the northern part of Gaza, which is the closest to the Israeli villages in the south of Israel, but also the city of Gaza. Once we have the city of Gaza and the Gazan civilians who are indeed experiencing a great deal of discomfort, cold, rain in their tents, and so on, will pressure the Hamas to give up everything in order for them to be able to go back to their houses in Gaza. And this is what must be done. And I believe, to answer your question, that that is what Donald Trump will make happen once he comes into office.
Our next question comes from Dit on YouTube, who asks, why is Israel not taking the opportunity of attacking Iran while they are vulnerable?
So the art of attack comprises a surprise element, part of war. And I believe that that particular element should be kept exactly as it is. Iran is indeed vulnerable, although I would not completely put it to bed, because a wounded tiger is still a very dangerous one. And it would be wise to act together with an international coalition. After all, Iran and the Islamic Republic of Iran is not only threatening Israel and the Jewish people. On the contrary, it is threatening very many countries in the Middle East, most of which are indeed Muslim, and it is threatening the entire West and the moderate, peace-loving world. So the entire world must actually gather together and do something about this threat when it's time.
And our last question today comes from Leahy on Instagram, who asks, 2025 has begun and I already feel stressed. Can you give me a message of hope for the new year?
Well, the first and most important thing that I can tell you, Leahy, is if you close your eyes for one moment and think of precisely this day 1 year ago and how terrible the situation for Israel was, and how many more people were actually fearful that the country was in such a vulnerable situation. Our situation in terms of strategy, security, etc., is much, much better. Also, I think there is a silver lining to what is happening. And unfortunately, we had to have that happen in order for the world to actually open its eyes and see all those demonstrations against countries in the European Union, in the West, against the so-called normal world, and to understand that radical Islam extremism is not something that is between Hamas and Israel. On the contrary, it is radical Islamism, whether it's Shiite or Sunni, against people who care. They may be Muslim, they can be Sunnis, they can be Shiites, they can be Christians, they can be Jews. But the entire world suddenly has their eyes open. Not everyone, but many, many people. And this is already a very good thing for the year to come. And above all, there is a God above us. And if you believe, it will give you a lot of strength. Thank you so much for being with us. That's all we have time for. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, we'll be back on Sunday at 3 p.m. Israel time, 8 a.m. East Coast time. See you soon.